Part 35. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 353. The combat method of the Lance civilization is undoubtedly reducing the number of life planets that are already scarce in the universe. We must know that the cost of transforming a planet's ecological environment is dozens of times greater than directly developing a planet with a habitable ecological environment for life. So in the end, the top leaders of the new Kamigawa civilization discussed and transferred the main fleet and interstellar infantry of the Lance civilization to the southern star field to deal with the triangular creatures. Because most of the wars against the triangular creatures did not require the participation of interstellar infantry, the task of slowly resisting the invasion of the triangular creatures fell on the Lance civilization and the Thunder Blade civilization. As for the Tiandao Shenhe stars, who have relatively powerful ground forces, apart from leaving some small flying warships for reconnaissance on this front, the main force has all gone to support the animal front of the physical war. As the Lancer's warship entered the atmosphere, the small and medium-sized turrets that had not fired due to range finally began to emit their own flames, symbolizing destruction. Before the game started, I saw the armor on both sides of the Lancer's warship turned downwards, and silver-gray flying fighter planes flew out from it, joining the operation to encircle and suppress the triangle. With the continuous bombardment of the close-range defense guns, main guns, and secondary guns on the Lance warships, the speed at which the microwave stance composed of more than 50 triangular creatures jointly dissipated energy could not keep up with the Lance. The speed of the attack was finally broken after a few seconds. The thick beam passed through the gathered triangular creatures, killing several triangular creatures on the path of the beam, while the rest scattered like birds and beasts, evading the artillery fire in arcs from all directions and heading towards Lance. The human battleship flew away. At this time, the small fighter planes dropped by the Lancers began to play their role. Their tails sprayed light blue flames, traveling through the air and attacking the triangles. As triangular creatures that can make the Kamigawa civilization fearful, they will naturally not be defeated like this. Although their bodies are larger than those fighter planes, they can fly extremely fast and are extremely flexible, just like flying in the sea. Like a passing fish. There was a battle in the air for a while. The Lancer's fighter planes did not dare to get too close to the triangular creature. They could only use the beam weapons on the fighter planes to shoot from dozens of meters away, and at the same time, they had to avoid other attacks from the side. Triangular body. When fighting the triangular creatures, both the Lancers and other civilizations on this front knew one thing, and that was that they could not get close to the 30-meter range around them. As long as they enter this range around the triangle, the fighter pilot will have a series of adverse reactions such as dizziness, confusion, and hallucinations. If you are lucky enough, you may be able to fly a fighter plane out of this area after entering this dangerous range, and survive happily. If luck point directly loses consciousness, it will hit the ground together with the fighter plane it is piloting, turning into a ball of bright fireworks and fire. A thick, silver-gray fighter jet spewed light blue high-temperature flames from its tail, hanging tightly dozens of meters behind a triangular body that was traveling through the air at high speeds. The four particle weapons mounted on the fuselage continued to spray the beam barrage towards the triangle in front. But the triangular body avoided most of the beam attacks like a fish swimming in the sea. A few of them were also disturbed by the microwaves surrounding it, which interfered with its stable energy structure, and thus escaped into the air. Call wingman number 1, and you drive away its flight path from the flanks. The wingman will continue to drive away according to the original formation, and will find an opportunity to break its defense after a while. As soon as the driver finished speaking, a young male's voice came to mind in the communication. Captain, wingman number 1 received it. Originally in L formation, the Lance fighter jets were chasing the triangle in front of them in the air. The one on the right began to speed up and cross the flight formation, and at the same time, it continuously launched attacks to reduce the flight trajectory of the triangle. The other two fighter planes also opened fire almost at the same time. For a time, most of the escape space of the triangular creature was blocked, and it was about to be focused on the fire. The triangle in front swooped downwards, and the 3 fighter jets in the rear followed closely behind. At this moment, the alarm in the fighter plane representing a conflict with the friendly flight track suddenly sounded. The pilot of the fighter plane was shocked and immediately shouted in the communication channel, "Be careful to avoid the friendly flight track," and then immediately shouted pilot the fighter plane to change tracks. But at this moment, a huge black creature flashed across the cockpit's field of vision, and then his eyes hurt, and something seemed to be stirring in his brain at a very fast speed. Red blood flowed from his nostrils, and then his vision went dark and he lost consciousness. A triangular-shaped creature jumped out right next to the fighter formation. It didn't launch any attack. It just passed between the 2 fighter planes. Then the 2 fighter planes rushed straight to the ground, plunged into the ground, and rolled back several times before stopping. Light black smoke began to rise from the tail of the fuselage. This scene often happens on the battlefield. Although occasionally a triangular-shaped creature is beaten into pieces by intensive firepower, overall, the Lancers are at a slight disadvantage. At this moment, the dense turrets on the Lancers battleship kept shooting at the triangular creatures flying around. Compared with fighter planes, the huge size of the space battleship can minimize the damage caused by the triangular creatures. Just when the battle was getting extremely intense, a figure wearing silver light armor and holding a short bow full of technology jumped from the battleship's open hatch to the top of the hull. With long silver hair hanging down behind his back, and handsome facial features paired with the gorgeous armor on his body, this landsman exudes an extremely noble temperament. With the help of Kamigawa, the Lance people spent a lot of manpower and material resources to build the god-making project Sky Arch. The first generation bearer is the current prince of Lance people, Raimoka Edming Lance. He and Sky Arch Zhigong super gene fusion rate reached 67%, making him the most compatible among the gene carriers selected by the Lance people. Lamoka quickly opened the short bow in his hand, and with the help of the gene engine, the dark energy in his body was woven into several arrows of light that emitted blazing white light and shot out. A triangular-shaped creature was flying forward at a high speed, and suddenly 3 light spots shot out from the side. The microwave's interference energy stabilizing effect immediately came into effect. The light arrow structure that originally maintained the shape of the arrow became unstable, but it did not escape directly, but turned into 3 streams of light that penetrated the body of the triangle. Red blood gushed out from the football-sized hole on the side of the triangular body. It opened its mouth and let out a gentle cry. The triangular body could no longer maintain its ability to fly in the air and fell to the surface. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 354. Under the encirclement and suppression by the Lancers warships and a large number of carrier-based fighter planes, as well as the sky bow, most of the more than 50 triangular creatures were wiped out, and only a few fled towards the sea. However, the Lancers, including Sky Bow, were not happy after winning because the triangle-shaped creatures they fought before were too weak. According to the description of triangular creatures in the Kamigawa database, these beings that can travel through the stars have long-range wormhole transmission, intergalactic telepathy, microwave radiation, and unknown genetic programming methods. The group of triangular creatures that the Lancers encircled and suppressed just now showed no other methods except microwave radiation and divine interference. This made Lamoka, the bow of the sky, have a bad guess in his mind, that is, the triangular creatures that were killed just now were just the product of genetic programming of the marine creatures in the sea of this planet by real triangular creatures. They are just some of their vanguards, pathfinding cannon fodder. Real triangular organisms may be lurking in the sea of this planet, constantly using genetic programming to transform an endless stream of triangular organisms in order to achieve the purpose of occupying this planet with Earth-like life. Thinking of this, Lamoka stated his guess to the captain of the battleship at his feet. Although he had a distinguished status, as a newcomer on the battlefield, he had to listen to the opinions of those who had experienced battles on some matters. After final discussion, they decided to report the situation here to the starport fortress in this star field, and planned to stay and eliminate the remaining triangular organisms on the planet. This situation is very common in the southern star field of Kamigawa. The survival conditions of some pre-nuclear civilizations here are extremely poor, and they may suffer heavy losses from the invasion of the triangle at any time. As for the Lancers and Thunder Blades who are responsible for guarding this star field, they are limited by their military strength and can often only take action after receiving a distress signal. And after clearing out the frequently active triangular bodies on a planet, it will take a long time to search for the remaining triangular body creatures lurking in the sea. This extremely passive combat method is naturally unable to resist the expansion of the triangle. Now the southern star field of the Kamigawa galaxy is gradually being slowly annexed by the triangle. So far, more than a dozen Earth-like habitable planets have been transformed by the triangle into Mercury with an ocean coverage rate of more than 85%. Even so, Kamigawa's strategic policy is still to resist mainly and attack as a supplement. At the same time, most of Kamigawa's troops are concentrated in the decisive battle with the Titan Lord Ogulsh at this moment, and they have no ability to counter-attack the triangular creatures. On star number 5 of the Kaya system, which is separated from Akam, the continuous explosions never stop. The Titan, who was dozens of meters tall, wore silver armor and moved his legs forward to resist the conventional artillery bombardment of Kamigawa's ground troops. The rare golden armored Titan among them stopped and raised his left arm when he was still 1,000 meters away from Kamigawa's defensive position. Then golden thunder suddenly appeared out of thin air in their palms, and then under the restraint of its master, it gradually condensed into an unstable thunder spear and was thrown towards the defensive position of the Kamigawa troops. The golden thunder spear fell on Kamigawa's defensive position. It did not cause any explosions or fire clouds. Instead, it disintegrated into countless leaping thunders, forming a thunder field covering dozens of meters. The Kamigawa soldiers within the range were unable to even scream, as their lives would be taken away by those leaping golden thunders. This made the Kamigawa soldiers and grassroots officers on the defensive side extremely frightened. Ever since those titans appeared, the front-line battlefield has become an extremely dangerous place. Often the comrades who were complaining to you just now about why they came to this bloody hell battlefield will be killed by the golden thunder falling from the sky in the next moment, along with everyone including you. Although the morale of the beast side was extremely high when fighting together with the Titan gods they believed in, no matter how high it was, they could not withstand the intensive and heavy firepower bombardment of Kamigawa. Even Titan warriors with extremely strong physical fitness will be bombarded to death by non-stop artillery fire and become one of the countless pieces of flesh blown to pieces on the battlefield. This battle lasted for several days, and both sides suffered heavy casualties, but neither could defeat the other. But at this moment, there was someone who couldn't sit still. As one of the 6 main gods of the Titans, Ogula gradually became impatient after seeing that he could not defeat Kamigawa's ground troops despite the lives of so many Titan warriors. A golden armored Titan admonished Ogula, who was walking towards the hatch of the Titan mothership holding a giant gun. Lord Ogula, Lord Tidmans will lead a fleet to arrive here in half a month. By then, with the power of the 2 adults, it will be easy to defeat Kamigawa. Oguls, who was walking towards the exit, paused when he heard this. He looked at the Titan who was admonishing him with a pair of burning red eyes and said coldly, "Why, do you think I can't defeat the swarm of ants in Kamigawa, or do you think we can't win this war without Tidmans?" Hearing this, the soul of the golden armored Titan suddenly appeared, and he quickly explained. "Lord Ogula, that's not what I meant. Your power is extremely powerful, and those ants in Kamigawa will never be your opponent. But the opponent definitely has more than one war god sitting in this star field. Sir, you may suffer a loss if you go to the battlefield alone." After hearing this, Ogula looked away and continued to move towards the exit of the battleship, but he said, Release Malula, this time I must let those ants in Kamigawa know the true power of the Titan God. Report to the Texas governor that the enemy Titan's identification signal has been detected on the battlefield. Wearing heavy black armor and closing his eyes to rest, Texas suddenly opened his eyes, slowly stood up from his seat, and an excited smile appeared on his resolute face. Finally Ken showed up. As the sound of artillery fire gradually died down, the beast-shaped civilized army inside unexpectedly retreated backwards and gradually disappeared from sight. Even the tall Titans did the same. However, no Kamigawa soldiers present thought this was a conspiracy, because they just wanted to take a short break to relieve physical and mental fatigue on this hell-like battlefield. But before these Kamigawa soldiers could rest for long, someone suddenly pointed at the sky and shouted, "What is that?" The sky suddenly turned fiery red, as gorgeous as the sunset, but people with sharp eyes discovered the fatal danger hidden under this beautiful appearance. An orange-red storm carrying scorching red sparks fell rapidly from the sky downwards. There was a roar, and the ground shook. The violent shaking caused many Kamigawa soldiers to fall to the ground. The storm carrying the sparks suddenly dispersed, revealing its existence, and at the same time, there was a deafening voice that echoed thousands of meters around. "The ants of Kamigawa, let's see what the flame purgatory is." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 355. As soon as Ogula finished speaking, the surrounding temperature rose rapidly, centered on his location, and in just a few seconds, smoke began to rise from the ground. The sparse vegetation began to turn yellow quickly, and then spontaneously ignited without fire. The soldiers who were most sympathetic to this change were the soldiers wearing simple exoskeleton armor. The originally cold metal on their bodies became as hot as iron due to the incoming heat, causing them to scream in pain uncontrollably. But soon their throats became hoarse and they could no longer make a sound. The water in their bodies quickly evaporated under the terrifying high heat. Finally, they fell to the ground like dried bacon and lost their voices. Ogules looked at the scene without any sympathy in his heart, and vented his own power to his heart's content. Under it is a giant creature with 2 wings on its back. It has a ferocious lizard-like head, and its body is covered with hard black armor-like armor. It has 2 pairs of vertical pupils located one behind the other on both sides of the head, looking at the surroundings indifferently. Scene. In this high-temperature radiation field created by Ogula, as the temperature continued to rise, the steel products around Ogula riding Malula began to quickly turn red and soften. At this moment, several beams of light fell on Ogula, and a violent explosion occurred, causing Ogula, who was riding Malulaman, to lean back. But Ogula dispersed the smoke rising after the energy explosion with a wave of his hand, and his eyes immediately fell on a group of large tanks and heavy beam cannons 1,000 meters away. Ogules did not choose to attack in person, but lightly clamped his legs, pointed the giant gun in that direction, and ordered, "Destroy them." Magrula opened his huge mouth full of sharp teeth and roared, then as if inhaling, he tilted his head back and the end of his neck swelled slightly, and a faint orange light could be seen emerging from it with the naked eye. The next moment, Malula suddenly opened his mouth, and an orange stream of light spurted out. The air was directly burned by the high temperature attached to the stream of light, creating a large hole. As for Malula's attack target, the position of the heavy firepower troops of Kamigawa immediately fell into a sea of fire, and the ground was directly burned into a small magma lake by Malula's breath. The Malula beast comes from the Tucker star field of the Red Star Ring. There are several giant beast civilizations in that star field. No one knows why the giant beast civilization came into being. However, according to the records of the Titans, there are very few planets in the entire universe that can breed giant beast civilization. Meguroro was born on a semi-molten planet and is one of several large creatures that inhabit that planet that absorb heat energy to make a living. Ogul's horse, Grula, was a powerful beast captured from that planet. Only the Titan god, the main god in the Titan civilization, could rely on his strength to suppress such a terrifying monster and drive it as a mount. Just when Ogul's and Malula, a pair playing with fire, turned an area of dozens of kilometers around into a scorching purgatory. An orbital airdrop pod violently broke through the clouds in the sky and hit the two riders who were playing with fire below. Ogula saw that it was an airdrop pod and had no intention of avoiding it. Under the command of his master, Malulong opened his mouth and breathed out a searing stream of light towards the airdrop compartment. The airborne pod didn't last even a second before it was melted by Malula's breath, but the next moment the orange breath split into two halves in mid-air. At the same time, there was also a roar that echoed throughout the sky, "Ogula! Take my axe!" Texas held the handle of the axe with one hand and pressed down on the tomahawk with the other hand, cutting Malula's breath in half from top to bottom, and then struck it on the lizard-like head with unabated force. Superior! Suddenly, Ogul's and Malula, who were cruising at low altitude, overturned in the air and crashed to the ground below, making a loud roar. Texas, on the other hand, used the chop just now to slow down its fall greatly, and only made two deep footprints after landing. Ogul's, who landed in the distance, stood up, looked at the tiny Texas and let out a heavy snort, then pointed the giant gun in his direction. A blood mark appeared on the side of the head, and the two pairs of eyes of Malula beast with hot blood stared at Texas with anger. After receiving the master's order, it flapped its wings on its back and stirred up a gust of hot wind, and then its hind legs landed on the ground. It pounced out like a moving mountain. It's quite big, so it's powerful enough to chop it like this. While Texas was speaking, a look of excitement appeared on his resolute and iron-blooded face. He held the handle of the black battle axe with both hands. The muscles of his arms wrapped in armor bulged, and with a loud roar, the axe blade slashed towards him. Huge claws. There was obviously a huge difference in size between the two, but Malula retracted his claws as if he had been pricked by a needle. He jumped over Texas' position and immediately turned around, lying on the ground and letting out a huge roar. Texas cleared the earth and rocks in front of him, took a few mouthfuls, and climbed out of the pit. He had just fought hard with the giant beast Malula. Although he successfully cut off a few of its claws, due to the strength of both parties, the reaction force of the collision sent Texas directly into the ground beneath his feet. Ogul's on the other side saw that several fingers and claws of his mount's forelimbs were broken, and he put away some of the contempt in his heart, and prepared to deal with the battle god of Kamigawa together with Malula. As a Titan god who has experienced hundreds of battles, Ogula knows when to be arrogant and when to be cautious. But before Ogul's could lift his favorite gun, several blazing white rays fell from high in the sky and hit him on the back. "Who is it?" Ogula turned around and raised his head, and saw a blonde Kamigawa woman several thousand meters above the ground with a pair of metal flying wings suspended in the air. She was aiming at him with a silver gun in her hand. Texas no longer paid attention to Ogul's in the rear, but focused all his attention on the low-lying monster Malula in front. He grinned slightly and muttered to himself. "Single combat is what men should do." After speaking, Texas raised the tomahawk with the special symbol illuminated, his eyes slightly widened, and pronounced his verdict to Malula. "Beast! I will cut off your head with 3 axes." After saying this, Texas opened his legs and burst out at his maximum speed, rushing towards Malula like a high-speed train. The pain of the severed finger just now was still fresh in his memory. Malula closed his huge mouth, his throat swelled, and for a second, the hot breath of light spurted out from his open upper and lower jaws, sweeping a wide path across the earth. Lava trench back cover toward Texas. Texas, who was charging at high speed, stepped hard on the ground with his right foot. After moving a certain distance to the left, he stepped on the ground again and shot towards Malula. His speed was not affected much at all. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 356. Although Malula is a monster and may have been favored by the Titan god, he naturally has his own uniqueness. Not only is he not low in intelligence, but also he has rich combat experience from birth to adulthood. Seeing that his breathing seemed to be unable to stop Texas, Magrullo maintained his breathing while opening his back and rapidly inciting his wings, trying to leave the ground and rise into the air. Seeing this, how could Texas let this beast that massacred a large number of Kamigawa soldiers fly into the air? Although he was confident that his power and physical strength were the best among the Kamigawa war gods, his shortcomings were also very serious. Obviously, apart from being physically tough and strong, he has no other strengths or abilities. If he really accidentally let this beast run into the air, it wouldn't matter if he couldn't reach it. Piexu, who restricted Ogul's movement through long-range sniping at high altitude, might also be in danger. Thinking of this, Texas raised his tomahawk and poured the violent dark energy in his body into the weapon in his hand that Kamigawa researchers called an experimental god-killing tomahawk. Then, using the speed of the charge, he used the maximum force to throw it towards Malula, who had risen dozens of meters in the air. Malula couldn't react at all, and a battle axe with a fiery orange light hit its head. The huge force made Malula do a somersault in mid-air and landed on the ground again. Texas' speed did not slow down, and he stretched out his god-killing tomahawk and flew towards him quickly, and was caught in one of his hands. Texas also took advantage of the time when Malula's head was smashed and rushed to it. He raised the tomahawk above his head with a jumping chop and slashed hard at the base of the huge Malula's wings. While in the air, Texas activated the new function of the god-killing tomahawk in his hand. The violent dark energy in his body was shaped into a huge axe beam through the weapon engine in the tomahawk. There was a sound of ground cracking, and one of Malula's wings was broken at the base, spurting out a large amount of hot blood, accompanied by Malula's extremely painful roar. Texas kicked the huge wings away, and was about to raise his tomahawk and strike at it, dismembering the giant beast and decapitating it. Unexpectedly, a huge gun burning with high heat flames fell from the sky and pierced into the ground beside Texas, followed by a horrific explosion. The spreading shock wave directly blew Texas and Malula away. "Go out." As soon as Texas landed on the ground, he spit out the mud that jumped into his mouth. As soon as he stood up, he saw a huge fist bombarding from above his head. There was a rumble and the ground shook. Centered on the location where Ogula fist struck, a dozen huge cracks opened in the ground over 100 meters in radius. But as the puncher, Oguls did not show any happy expression, because he could feel a resistance coming from under his fist. Sure enough, the next moment his fist smashed into the ground was lifted up by a strong force. Ogula also used this force to stand up from a half-kneeling state, took a few steps back and covered his face with his left arm to resist the sniper ray coming from the high-altitude snow. At the same time, he pulled out the giant gun he had thrown before and retreated to his horse, Grula. At this moment, Texas also jumped out of the huge punch hole made by Oguls. Except for some broken marks on the armor on his body, he did not suffer any injuries. However, Texas could feel that there was less energy to support the strength of his divine body. In addition to its own hardness, the divine body of the Kamigawa civilization would also be affected by the energy reserve. The divine body is like a special piece of physical armor. If the normal defense power is set to 100, then when the energy is sufficient, the defense power will be enhanced dozens or hundreds of times depending on the model and specialness of the divine body. This is also the reason why super warriors with divine bodies have extremely abnormal physical defenses, but they are still easily injured by some special weapons that break through the defense. For example, the flaming sword of the angel civilization has a very peculiar material. Coupled with the angel's special manufacturing process, This weapon can emit a special destructive force field that can disrupt the surface defense of the god's body, thus causing damage to the blade. The moment of arrival, the defense of the divine body is reduced to a very low level, thereby causing damage to the divine body. But on this battlefield, it is obvious that Titan does not have such craftsmanship and can only rely on constant attacks to consume the energy of the owner of the divine body. In Texas, when the two war gods Pyexu dueled with Ogula on the surface of Kaya, Kamigawa's fleet also launched an attack on the Titan fleet. Thousands of battleships of various types fought together. Although the giant Titan battleship had strong defense, it could not defeat four hands with two fists. Countless small space fighters broke into the interior of the battleship, and the various facilities on it were destroyed. At the same time, some space fighters carry a portable dark matter bomb, which is used by some aerospace-grade civilizations as star-destroying weapons. Even a few of these portable dark matter bombs inside the Titan battleship would be too much. On the surface, Texas and Pyexu's opponents exchanged views with each other at this moment. Texas and the huge Ogules kept fighting with giant guns and tomahawks. Although the two sides were dozens of times different in size, they were still fighting back and forth. On the other side, Pyexu and Malula were shooting at each other, with beams of light and red breath coming and going in the airspace between them. Because one of his wings was chopped off by Texas with a tomahawk, Malula, who had lost the ability to fly, could only hold his head high and spit out the stream of light in frustration. Therefore, there is not much pressure to clear the snow. After shooting Malula, there is still time to pay attention to the Texas side and occasionally provide fire support. Boom! The tomahawk and the huge flaming spear collided in mid-air. Although Texas was burned and felt uncomfortable all over, his strong and iron-blooded face did not show it at all. The huge force of the counter-shock made both sides move back, but the difference was huge. Ogula only took a slight step back, while Texas often flew dozens of meters upside down and hit the ground. You are the first being who can compete with me in strength. Tell me, what is your name? Ogules did not rush to attack this time, but stopped his movements and asked. Kamigawa Ares, Texas. After Texas answered, he took the opportunity to ventilate and secretly let his body temperature, which could burn others, cool down. I've written it down. You are the second Kamigawa battle god I've asked to write down. Texas was a little curious when he heard this. Ogules looked very proud. It would be difficult for him to remember and admit that he was his opponent, so he asked directly, I am the second one, can you tell me, who's the first one? Ogules put the giant gun to his side and exhaled a long breath before answering. That was one of your Kamigawa war gods that I met shortly after I arrived in the Kamigawa galaxy. He called himself the Blade of Kamigawa. He is the first person so far, other than his own kind, who has made me feel the crisis of life and death. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 357. When Ogula said this, the picture of that day's battle appeared in his mind. It was a masculine Kamigawa man holding a black giant sword. With a lot of burns all over his body and one eye blind, he poured all the energy in his body into the sword in his hand, regardless of his own safety. Then he yelled that he wanted to kill himself and protected those ants, and controlled the giant sword in his hand to fall from above his head, almost piercing his head at that time. However, it was a pity that the man who claimed to be the Blade of Kamigawa could not last until the end, and his energy was exhausted, and he was seriously injured and died on the spot. Texas already knew who it was when he heard Ogules say the words Blade of Kamigawa. Like himself, he is a product of Kamigawa's second-generation god-making project, but unlike himself, the Blade of Kamigawa is more balanced and has no shortcomings, and has outstanding long and short-range combat capabilities. It is a pity that he died in the battle with Ogula. Texas had a good impression of that young man. Rather than a soldier, he wanted to be one of those knights who were popular in the cold weapon civilization, although the two of them did not have worked together, But Texas has heard rumors about him. It is said that he cherishes the lives of his subordinates very much. After a few breaths, Ogula broke away from the memory, pulled out the giant gun on the side again, turned toward Texas and said, "Now we enter the second round, and what follows is not just a collision of pure power." As soon as Ogula finished speaking, the surroundings began to heat up, and the extreme high temperature radiated to the surroundings. Texas immediately felt the change in the surrounding environment. The ground began to turn black, the air was directly ignited, and began to burn violently. The red armor on Ogula's body was frighteningly red under the reflection of the flames, like red-hot metal. But the strange thing is that there is nothing abnormal about Ogula, who is wearing armor. He still looks like that and is not affected by the high temperature at all. But before Texas could continue to think about it, the attack from Ogules had already arrived. The giant gun, emitting terrifying light and heat, was like a laser, cutting long gaps in the ground. Texas wanted to get closer to Ogules, but was forced back by the terrifying high temperature around it. The battle fell into a state of anxiety for a while, and Texas could only run for his life to avoid the giant guns that kept attacking. Seeing Texas dodge his attack, Ogula was not in a hurry. Having had many battle experiences with the Kamigawa war gods, he knew very well that the high defenses of these war gods would become worse the longer the time went on. Weak. Among all the Titan gods, Ogula is a very special being. He has the weakest conventional combat power. However, he has a characteristic that he gets stronger as he fights. As time goes by, he can gradually transform the battlefield into one that is most suitable for him. Environment of. Often when that time comes, even the best war and thunder among the Titan gods cannot defeat him. As time passed, Texas couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity in his heart. Although he avoided most of Ogule's attacks, the gradually rising temperature around him made him feel a little burning. Suddenly Texas remembered that when Augustus mentioned the blade of Kamigawa, he had said, fighting with him made him feel the crisis of life and death. Texas immediately recalled the information about the blade of Kamigawa in his mind. After a while, he did not find that the blade of Kamigawa had any ability that could pose a threat to Ogules. Suddenly Texas had a flash of inspiration. The blade of Kamigawa died of exhaustion, not at the hands of Ogules. Does this mean that the blade of Kamigawa had discovered the weakness of Ogules? But in the process of attacking the weak point, the blade of Kamigawa may have been severely damaged, and died of exhaustion before the final blow was completed. Thinking of this, Texas began to carefully observe Ogules while avoiding the attack. A few minutes later, Texas was thrown out by the flaming giant gun and fell heavily to the ground dozens of meters away. For the first time, the hand holding the tomahawk felt a burning pain. Texas was burned, and as the temperature accumulated, the divine body could no longer ignore the damage caused by the high heat in Ogules' attack. But Texas was not just being beaten during this period. His eyes finally fell on the red armor on Ogules. Whether it works or not, we can only take a risk and see. Texas' resolute and iron-blooded face showed a look of determination. There was no reason why the blade of Kamigawa could do it, but he couldn't. He stood up, stepped on the ground and burst out in the direction of the huge figure. Ogules didn't care. The temperature of the protective circle around him was comparable to the surface of a star, exceeding 10,000 degrees. Even the Titan Lord would be burned. So Ogules just raised his gun and swept away, leaving an isolated ravine on the ground, hoping to push Texas back and attack him. The giant gun was like an Optimus pillar crossing the position of Texas, but Ogula suddenly found that the feel of the hand was wrong, because there was no sense of power from the collision. Shocked in his heart, Ogules scanned the ground with his red eyes, but could not find Texas. At this moment, with a roar, a small figure covered in fire rushed from the terrifying flames around Ogula to his feet. He raised his axe and struck hard at Ogula's heel. The huge force made Ogules unsteady and fell to the ground on his back. Texas ignored the severe pain radiating from all over his body, opened his mouth and let out a huge roar to divert his attention, jumped up and slashed the god-killing battle axe towards the red armor on the back of Ogullet. Just like the scene when Malula's wings were chopped off, the god-killing battle axe pulled out a long axe, splitting a huge hole in Ogullet's back armor, and the blood spurted out and drenched Texas all over. But the next moment, the blood was evaporated by the high temperature, and at the same time, there was the painful scream of Ogullet. After Texas heard the screams from above, his tense mood immediately relaxed. His guess was right. Ogullet's heart collapsed at this moment. He was burned by his own flames, and he was severely burned. As a last resort, he lost the ability to maintain high-temperature radiation. The high-temperature radiation source disappeared, and the high-temperature flames that were burning the air quickly dissipated. The high temperature around Texas, comparable to that of the surface of a star, also began to plummet due to the loss of energy supply. Soon this scorching purgatory filled with high temperatures collapsed in front of the planet's self-healing power. Although it was still very hot, at least it would not burn the Earth. On the ground covered with magma patterns, Texas was naked to the upper body, half kneeling on the ground with a tomahawk in his hand, and the flesh and blood of the burned areas on his body began to regenerate. On the other side, Ogulès, who was lying on the ground covered in smoke, was much miserable. His original appearance was almost unrecognizable. Only the red armor was still the same as before. After a while, Texas started fighting, gritting his teeth and breathing heavily, dragging his god-killing battle axe and walking towards Ogulès. Ogulès also stood up slowly with his seriously injured body. He knew that he still underestimated Texas, and he already had a premonition in his heart that he seemed to be falling on this unknown star today, but as a Titan god, his glory will not let him suffer death, so he will keep fighting until death comes. More than 10 seconds later, as Texas leaped 200 meters into the air and roared out the Texas guillotine, the sight of the Titan god Ogulès fell into darkness. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 359. The decisive battle in the Cow Galaxy finally ended with the fall of the flame god Ogulès. Many Kamigawa fleets pursued the retreating Titan fleet, but they did not achieve much results. On the contrary, more than half of the Kamigawa fleet was lost, and a large number of warships were damaged in this decisive battle. As for Texas, who killed Ogulès, he was immediately transported to the rear after the war. Although Texas successfully killed Ogulès, he was also seriously injured. The temperature on the surface of the star was not so easy to bear. According to the evaluation of Kamigawa's scientific researchers, Texas' body wanted to a full restoration will take a year. As for the task of continuing the battle with the Titan civilization, it fell on the two battle gods, Spear of Kamigawa to Niugjiu and Fist of Kamigawa to Linyuan. Without the main god-level powerhouse in charge, the Titan fleet could only dispatch the accompanying ordinary Titan gods to stop the combination of Linyuan and Pyexu. However, the effect is not ideal. After all, there is a big gap between the Titan god and the Titan Lord god. Often the Titan fleet successfully withstands the fierce attack of the Kamigawa fleet, and one's own Titan god will be killed by the battle gods of Kamigawa. In order to prevent the loss of high-end combat power from continuing like this, the Titan civilization and its affiliated beast body civilization vomited out all the star fields previously attacked by Ogulès, and even were invaded by Kamigawa and occupied by the original beast body civilization. Starfield. On the battlefield in the Kamigawa galaxy, the new Kamigawa civilization is making rapid progress, and the Angel civilization located in the Red Star Ring Shima Star Domain is not only on vacation during this period. Because of Binghua's order, the Skyblade Legion did not dispatch on a large scale, and had been preventing the counterattack of the Beast Body and Titan civilization from coming at any time. but the angel-affiliated civilizations didn't know this. They took advantage of the weak opportunity when the Shima Empire was divided and lost most of its space power, and they launched crazy attacks to attack stars and lands. The reason why they are so crazy is naturally because they obtained huge benefits in the war that they could not get in the Angel Nebula. Just as Binghua said when talking to Kesha before the expedition, angels only need to throw out some bait, and after those affiliated civilizations have reaped the benefits, they don't have to raise their swords from behind to urge them forward. The infrastructure construction carried out by the affiliated civilization that had just arrived at Red Star Ring under Binghua's order came in handy at this time. The Angel Stargate has become the only fast passage for the Angel Nebula to reach the Red Star Ring. Now every Stargate will spit out a large number of affiliated civilization fleets from the Angel Nebula. Some underground forces and dignitaries from various civilizations also followed the fleet to this strange star field that was countless light years away from their hometown. For a time, centered on the area where the Stargate is located, a prosperous simple city was formed on the giant gate star in a short period of time. Although there was a little chaos due to too much civilization, it was at least maintained under the maintenance of the angels. The order of the normal world. Queen, this is the combat situation of Megara, Moleskaz, Kybri, Kenpo, and other civilizations in the near future. Binghua took the transparent light curtain from Jingnan's hand, and after lightly sliding his fingers on it a few times, he casually put it aside and continued busy debugging his weapon. Seeing this, Jingnan asked curiously, "Queen, aren't you curious about their results?" Binghua kept moving, her fingers operating on the metal gauntlet projection in front of her, importing complex calculation formulas into it, but this did not prevent her from answering Jingnan's question. "It doesn't matter to me what kind of results they achieve. What I need is for them to hold back the forces of the Shima civilization for me. I don't want to be harassed by those orcs every day. As for what results they achieved, what benefits they gained, and what they did, I don't care. I don't have the leisure to form a pan-civilization alliance in space. Our angels have only one enemy from the beginning to the end, and that is the Titan Protoss. As long as they are defeated, the remaining beast civilization will not be afraid." Jingnan was thoughtful when he heard the words. After being the queen's assistant for so many years, she didn't understand all the twists and turns, but her ears and eyes were influenced by it, and she could at least understand some of the words Binghua deliberately explained to her. Binghua slowly exhaled a breath, relaxed his body and leaned on the seat behind him, and put away the gauntlet projection in front of him. Binghua has been manufacturing and researching this gauntlet-type auxiliary equipment for hundreds of years. It was made with a line skeleton before the war with the Eternal Ascended Ones. Since then, it has been kept in the arsenal at a disadvantage because there is no suitable driving algorithm. It wasn't until the establishment of diplomatic relations with the Kamigawa civilization and many technical exchanges between Angel and Kamigawa that Binghua started thinking about perfecting this auxiliary equipment. Of course, this mainly depends on He-11's research results. The emergence of microcomputing cloud technology in the dark plane has made it possible to use multiple distractions in battle. Without this technology, even if this gauntlet is successful, it will only be useless. The kind that are tasteless to eat and a pity to throw away. Binghua, who had finally escaped from the war, did not have time to spare. Under the gaze of Jingnan, whose mouth twitched slightly, he opened the database and retrieved a sword-shaped projection model. However, unlike the previous hand armor, which was quite exquisite and gorgeous, this somewhat luxurious giant sword only had the most basic skeleton and energy circuit miniatures, and seemed to be just a semi-finished product. Seeing this, Jingnan left with a little regret. She originally wanted to invite the queen to visit the newly minted affiliated civilized city on the giant star, but seeing that the queen was so busy, she didn't bring it up. Binghua raised his head slightly and looked at Jingnan's back, but in the end he didn't say anything. The last time Binghua got into trouble and teased Jingnan, after seeing her look like that. Binghua gradually began to care about some of the behaviors that Jingnan had shown in the past that were not in line with the normal behavior of a female angel. Binghua didn't think in any direction at first, but she was not stupid. After doubts arose in her heart, she soon discovered that Jingnan's sexual orientation was a bit weird. Although liking someone of the same sex is not a shameful thing, Binghua finally felt a little defensive in her heart. Recently, she and Jingnan rarely bathed together and relaxed as usual. Because when you know that the same-sex angel who has been honest with you has been coveting your body, Binghua will always feel an inexplicable sense of shame in his heart. However, these are just trivial matters. The real difficulties will soon come. According to reports from the angel warriors who went to the Tianding Star territory and the Sabata Alliance, a large number of battleships and soldiers are gathering in the two star fields. Binghua had a hunch that these were definitely coming towards her, and now she just hoped that she could survive the revenge of the beast body civilization. As long as the second batch of angels expeditionary force will set off in a while, as long as the second batch of expeditionary force arrives, Binghua will decide to launch a purge war against the Tianding Star territory and the Sabata War Alliance. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 360. As long as these minions of the Titan civilization are cut off, Binghua decides to launch the final war, march into the Titan kingdom, and completely disintegrate the alliance of the animal civilization in the physical war. Just as Binghua was contemplating future tactics in his mind, Jingnan, who had left before, suddenly turned back, his footsteps a bit hurried. "What's wrong, Jingnan?" "Queen, just now the captain of the fleet of Mora's civilization sent news that one of their medium-sized fleets lost contact in the western star field of Shima." "There's nothing strange about this, Jingnan. It's normal for the fleet to lose contact. It must have been ambushed by those orcs again." Binghua didn't pay attention because this was not the first time this happened. The combat effectiveness of most affiliated civilization fleets is generally weaker than that of the Shima orcs. Therefore, sometimes a fleet of an affiliated civilization is ambushed by the Shima orcs and is completely annihilated. But Jingnan obviously didn't come back because of those trivial matters. "Queen, the captain of Mora's fleet also sent a message that their fleet was defeated by a huge fleet in the Western Star region, and not a single warship escaped from the battlefield." Binghua raised his eyebrows when he heard this, and accurately captured the special word huge scale in Jingnan's words. After the destruction of Shima's power center, the division of the empire, and the relentless friction of the angel-affiliated civilizations during this period, it is unlikely that a fleet that can be called a huge fleet can be assembled. Thinking of this, Binghua knew that Jingnan must have something to say, so he motioned for her to continue. "Queen, the captain of Mora's fleet also said that the last picture sent back by the expedition fleet they sent out showed that the enemy warships attacking their fleet were not in the style of Shima orc warships." Binghua understood, and already had a guess in his mind. Before, he was still wondering why the Titans' retaliatory war had not come yet, but now it seems that they should have already started to take action. "Jingnan, go and tell the fleet captains of those affiliated civilizations to stop going deeper into the Western Star territory in the near future." Seeing that his queen lowered her head and said nothing more, Jingnan couldn't help but ask, "Does the queen have any other instructions?" Binghua raised his head in surprise when he heard this, with a hint of confusion in his black eyes. "What else is there?" "Oh, I understand, no more, Jingnan, just tell them like this. You should know that the enemy's situation is unknown now. We can't do anything for the time being. We can only passively defend and wait for them to reveal their flaws. Then I can formulate a battle plan." The order issued by Binghua made some fleet captains of affiliated civilizations a little confused. Except for the few civilizations that followed Binghua into the Shima star field at the beginning, they obeyed the order and stopped conquering the western star field of Shima. Although the group of civilizations who later rushed to Red Star Ring obeyed Binghua's orders on the surface, they did not fully follow them in private. Jingnan, who was responsible for conveying the order, was quite angry. Binghua just smiled and reassured Jingnan not to worry. As time passed, reports of various affiliated civilizations encountering large-scale fleet attacks continued to come from the western star field of Shima. At first, Binghua ignored the requests from the affiliated civilizations for angel support because she wanted to see what the animal civilization was doing. Until one day, a representative elected by Mora and several affiliated civilization fleet captains came to the door. "Dear Queen of Angels, please show kindness and save the civilization that is loyal to you. We have lost nearly half of our men during this period. If this continues, we will be completely wiped out." Binghua sat on the throne in the Sky Blade Hall, looking at the exaggerated performance of the Moran below, feeling a little speechless. The Mora man below, who had high hopes from various civilizations, started to perform even harder when he saw that Binghua's expression was cold and did not change due to his performance. "Queen, just yesterday, a fleet of more than 80 warships under my command was attacked while performing a patrol mission in the central Shima star field. It stands to reason that we Mora people have not provoked anyone recently, but an unknown fleet suddenly jumped next to us, without even saying hello, and bombarded us indiscriminately. As the civilization under your command, we naturally represent your face, Queen. Of course, we cannot escape, so we have a head-on fight with them. But I didn't expect that the enemy's fleet was too strong, and my men were no match for me. I lost more than half of them before I could get rid of their pursuit. I beg the Queen, you must avenge those sons and daughters who died." Seeing the tears squeezed out of the eyes of the Moran below, Binghua finally couldn't help it anymore and raised his hand in frustration to indicate that he could stop your performance. The Mora man below was overjoyed, and immediately began to wipe the tears squeezed from the corners of his eyes, showing a flattering smile, and asked cautiously, "Queen, are you willing to send angels to help us?" Binghua rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. Even though these subordinate civilizations were usually perfunctory in following his orders, when they really needed the help of angels, they pretended to be more grandsons than grandsons. Binghua nodded, which was a reassurance to the Mora people below. After this period of observation, Binghua had intended to send Skyblade to support the affiliated civilization to prevent their fleet from being damaged too much and affecting their future strategy. "Okay, you don't have to act. I will send the Skyblade to support you. I don't know whether it will have any effect." After receiving Binghua's definite recovery, the Mora men returned happily. With the help of Skyblade, the fleets of affiliated civilizations have suffered a lot less losses. Even if they encounter an enemy fleet attack, they will have the power to withstand it and will not be beaten and run away. Just when Binghua thought the situation would continue for a long time, something happened that caught her off guard. "What did you say?" "The Stargate of Galaxy number 1 was attacked by an unknown fleet." Binghua stood up from his seat behind the long table and looked at the female angel who came to report. His black eyes exuded an inexplicable power. "Yes, Queen. Just now, the giant star Sky Blade responsible for defending Galaxy number 1 sent a message for help." The female angel who spoke was a little nervous. If the situation hadn't been urgent, she wouldn't have come to face the Queen's pressure in person. Instead, she had conveyed it to Jingnan and asked her to report to the Queen. "I understand, you go down first." After Binghua said this, he immediately used the angel's dark communication to contact the 7 Sky Blades in the temporary base that were idle for the time being and were not out on missions. The Skyblade captains listened to the order and immediately gathered all the angel warriors under the Skyblade organization, and then set off with me to support the giant gate star. A few hours later, Binghua, followed by a group of angels, arrived on the surface of giant gate star in Galaxy number 1. The giant stargate that originally stood on the ground was seriously damaged at this moment, and most of the main body had collapsed. But what was more eye-catching than this was a Skyblade battleship that pierced the ground diagonally, with bomb marks all over the hull. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 361. Binghua's expression didn't change much as usual, but it just looked a little colder. Signaling the angels behind him to spread out and search for survivors, Binghua himself led dozens of angel warriors to fly towards the sky blade that crashed on the ground. Landing on the platform of Tianren, Binghua's heart sank. The corpse of an angel warrior was lying on the platform in a mess. At the same time, under their bodies, countless blood tributaries converged into several bloody streams and spread to Binghua's feet wearing combat boots. Without caring about anything else, Binghua squatted down and gently turned over the body of a female angel on the ground. A childish pale face came into Binghua's eyes. What caught Binghua's attention the most was the wound that spanned most of the female angel's chest. It turned out to be a stab wound. Binghua's murmur was heard by Jingnan, who asked in a low voice. "Queen, who did this?" Binghua stood up. Although he was sad in his heart, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said in a deep voice. "It should be done by the Tianding Star people. They are the only ones with this strength among ordinary animal civilizations." Then Binghua and his team of dozens of angels quickly inspected the entire sky blade and found the bodies of more than 10,000 angels in total. At the same time, the high-ranking angel Rosa, who was nailed to the ground by the flaming sword with wide-eyed eyes, was also found on the bridge of Skyblade, who was the captain of Skyblade. After Binghua entered the bridge, he knelt on one knee and half-kneeled. His left arm passed through the back of Rosa's neck. He gently lifted her upper body, brushed away the golden hair stuck to her cheeks, and held her open. His eyes slowly closed. Because of her good battlefield command ability, Rosa was promoted by Binghua to the captain of a Skyblade after the Battle of Eternal Ascended. Unlike Ran and others, although Rosa's commanding ability is good, she has never been close to Binghua. Maybe sometimes, Binghua's behavior makes some angels feel a sense of distance. The relationship between the two was a relatively pure superior-subordinate relationship, but even so, Binghua still had a rage in her heart that was burning her mind. Not only for the high-level angel Rosa in her arms, but also for the tens of thousands of angel warriors guarding the giant gate star, she will definitely make the Tianding Star people pay the price in blood. After gathering the angel corpses of the giant gate star, the number of dead angels was finally counted, a total of 31,230, and the number of missing angels was 3,220. The dead angels included one high-ranking angel and 5,823 second-generation angels. Such huge losses almost surpassed the previous Battle of Gram. As for the affiliated civilizations, the losses were even greater. The cities built by the affiliated civilizations on the giant gate star were damaged to more than 80%. A few survivors described the situation to the angels. After being corrected by the angels who conveyed the information, Binghua, what was heard is described below. A huge fleet suddenly appeared near the giant gate system, and then began a reckless orbital bombardment of the planet. The Skyblade commanded by Rosa appeared at this time and fought with this large fleet. The battle between the two sides was fierce, and corpses fell from the sky like dumplings. In the end, the Skyblade, fighting alone, was attacked by the enemy and its shield was breached. However, the strength of the Skyblade itself exceeded the expectations of the beast civilization. In order to resolve the battle before the angels' reinforcements arrived, the enemy launched a battle and landed on the Skyblade to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the angel. The angel warriors refused to retreat and defended the Skyblade. In the end, the entire army was annihilated. Even the captain Rosa died heroically. Not a single angel chose to flee in fear of the battle. As for the beast fleet that attacked the giant gate star, after the battle, they cleaned the battlefield hastily, collected the bodies of their own dead and the angels' flaming swords, and then hurriedly retreated from the giant gate star. After listening to the description of the angel under his command, Binghua clenched his fists on the table. "Killed my warrior and took away the flaming sword. But things belonging to angels are never easy to get. In an unknown star field in Galaxy number 2, a large fleet is sailing towards the northwest of the Shima star field. These fleets are pointed in front and wide in back, like giant metal ships traveling in the universe. The exterior of the ship is covered with alternating layers of dim silver armor, and there are also some totem patterns with a strong civilized atmosphere. However, the damaged armor and exposed repair marks on some battleships proved that this fleet had just experienced a war not long ago. Although General Tidala and these winged men are powerful, they were not defeated by you, General. I think Lord God of Thunder is still too careful. A Tianding Star man complimented a strong Tianding man wearing complex silver-gray heavy armor sitting on the main seat. Don't make unreasonable remarks about lordly odds, but those wingmen are indeed not weak. We lost many soldiers before we captured them. So don't underestimate them because of their temporary victory. After saying that, Tianding Star General Tidala, who was sitting on the main seat, picked up a heavy sword placed aside that was entirely frosted silver in color and had faint red lines on the blade. It was clearly the Angel's high-end standard weapon, Raging Flame Sword. After looking at it for a while, Tidala still couldn't see any clue. He tried to swing the sword and found that it was not heavy, not as heavy as his own weapon. What kind of weapon is this thing? None of the group leaders of the heavenly cauldron stars below spoke up first. After a few seconds, one of the group leaders finally spoke. General Tidala, I have seen those wingmen use this thing before. As long as you raise it above your head, this thing will emit a large scorching red light with a bang, and then our soldiers will be scorched. When the Tianding Star War leader said this, he looked a little scared, because in the encirclement and suppression battle not long ago, he saw with his own eyes that the two most elite teams under his command were held by 5 angels in the hands of the general. He aimed his weapon, and then saw a flash of red light. 2 of his teams were destroyed on the spot and burned to coke. The other chapter leaders also nodded. Although the winged warriors were not weak, there was still a big gap between them and these chapter leaders. Only the winged men holding such red-edged heavy swords are more difficult to deal with, especially when several of these winged men gather together. The killing power is simply terrifying, killing a large number of their warriors. Tidara, who was sitting on the main seat, saw that the faces of his chapter leaders no longer looked down on the winged people before, and nodded secretly in his heart. The reason why he raised this topic was that he didn't want his subordinates to look down on those winged people. Of course, he himself was also very curious about the red-edged épée in his hand. You must know that he also personally participated in the decisive battle with the winged man. What impressed him most was the blonde winged man he met in the winged man's bridge. His combat power was very powerful. If he hadn't relied on both sides, due to the gap in combat experience, it is difficult to say who will win by taking away the opponent's weapon while the opponent is accumulating strength. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 362. When thinking of this, Tidara turned over his right palm with lingering fear and took a look, only to see that the flesh and blood in his palm was scorched black. This was when he was snatching the winged man's weapon and was accidentally burned by the high temperature on the opponent's weapon. In fact, what Tidara didn't know was that he was really lucky. If he hadn't taken away the flaming sword from Rose's hand, penetrated Rose's chest in turn, and then left the sword in Rose's in the wound, with the self-healing ability of Rose's 3 generations of warriors, he would not die at all. For high-level angels, the flaming sword is a weapon that increases their combat effectiveness, and it is also a weapon that can kill themselves. Tidara and his chapter leaders discussed for a long time, but they still couldn't make the blade of the sword glow like the winged man. However, a chapter leader suddenly proposed a feasible plan, which was to bring the captured wingman prisoners over for questioning. Tidala thought for a while and felt that the chapter leader's proposal was feasible. The people present were all the most powerful warriors among the Tianding people, and they were not afraid of what kind of trouble a winged man could make. Soon, several Tianding warriors wearing heavy armor escorted a winged man to the hall. This winged man's brown eyes hidden under her blonde hair exuded a strong aura of hatred. If her hands and feet had not been shackled with heavy unknown metal shackles, the Tianding people present had no doubt that she would explode and injure anyone. Tidala didn't care about the gaze of the wingman below, because he was used to the appearance of the defeated. At this moment, he was concerned about how to use the red-edged heavy sword in his hand. You must know that the Tianding people captured it in the previous battle. Quite a few of these weapons. Holding the flaming sword, Tidara walked up to the winged man who was being held down by two elite warriors. He stretched out his big hand wearing a gauntlet and lifted his chin, and suddenly a fair and frail face came into view. However, Tidala, who is a Tianding star, said that he does not like this type of females. He prefers those tall and strong female Tianding stars. Hey, Yuren, as long as you tell me how to use this thing, I can make the decision to let you go. Tidara used his own Kamigawa language which was not fluent, and judging from the reaction of the winged man in front of him, he could clearly understand it. However, the winged man did not speak, he just looked at Tidara with eyes that wanted to kill all the orcs present. However, when the angel noticed the flaming sword in Tidara's hand, her eyes moved slightly, and she turned away from Tidara's big hand that lifted her chin. She stared at the ground sideways and said something in a low voice. You don't understand even if I say it? Tidala didn't care, and directly pierced the flaming sword into the metal floor in front of the winged man, signaling the Tianding warrior who was holding him to let go of her. Then you show me how to use this weapon. As long as I learn how to use this weapon, I will let you go. The force exerted on her body disappeared, making the female angel feel light all over, and slowly stood up from the ground. She looked extremely harmless as her height only reached Tidala's chest. Stretching out her hands restricted by thick metal shackles, she grasped the handle of the flaming sword that was pierced into the floor in front of her. The next moment, the female angel's consciousness sank into her own dark plane. Through her second-generation angel authority, she successfully activated the flaming sword weapon engine that did not belong to her, and introduced most of the dark energy in her body into it. At the same time, she compiled a simple algorithm to suppress energy output, allowing the flaming sword's weapon engine continues to run at its lowest output until the energy is exhausted. Tidara witnessed with his own eyes that the flaming sword that had been mediocre in his hand before began to glow faintly in the hand of the winged man in front of him. However, what happened at the next moment shocked the chapter leaders sitting on both sides. Because the winged man's previous movements were very slow, the thinking of the surrounding Tianding people also slowed down. But when the blade began to emit a faint scorching light, the winged man suddenly moved dozens of times faster, and the blade moved inward to easily cut through the shackles on her feet. With her hands freed, the female angel warrior immediately turned her body on the spot and slashed the 360-degree range of her body with the flaming sword held upside down, forcing back the two Tianding warriors behind her who were watching her. The next moment, the female angel raised her hands that were bound by shackles, and changed the flaming sword she was holding upside down to the upright position. She gritted her teeth and rushed towards Tidala with red eyes, trying to pull a high-ranking Tianding star back. Seeing that the general was in danger, the surrounding chapter leaders stood up almost at the same time and wanted to rush over to rescue him, but what happened next moment made them stop. Tidala looked at the blade of the sword that was stabbing him, raised his right arm, and his gauntlet easily pushed the sword away. Then he grabbed one of the female angel's arms with his left hand and pulled it into her arms, and then hit the girl with a jab. The face of a famous female angel. The female angel who originally wanted to pull a senior Tianding person back was blinded by this punch, and her body fell back uncontrollably. However, Tidara would not give up just like that. He held the winged man's arm with no intention of letting go, and landed several quick jabs on the female angel's face. In the end, Tidara ended with an uppercut, knocking the female angel away. The flaming sword in his hand also fell out of his hand and fell to the ground with a clang. Tida straightened his waist. Due to his height, he had always hunched over when attacking before. Now he stood up straight again, feeling extremely oppressive in the somewhat blurry sight of the female angel who fell to the ground. I hate people who resist me the most. It's a pity that your freedom is leaving you. Take her down and offer her as a sacrifice to Lord Liod's. The two Tianding stars who retreated to the side immediately stepped forward to hold down the female angel who fell on the ground. After nodding to Tidala, they dragged the female angel on the ground and left. The female angel watched Tidala pick up the flaming sword she had just held. A faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, her cherry lips stained with dust opened and closed, and without making any sound she just mouthed. The queen will definitely catch up, she will, and then you will all die under the queen's sword. Tidala didn't pay too much attention to the winged man who was dragged away. Instead, he picked up the flaming sword that fell to the ground and lightly swiped it towards the ground. A faint red mark appeared on the ground. Tidala was a little happy when he saw this. This weapon finally showed a hint of its original power, but it was just too small and too light. Seeing this, the battle leader below quickly congratulated Tidala for getting a treasure. Tidara did not dissipate everyone's interest and directly announced the start of the banquet to celebrate their successful completion of the tactical goal and the destruction of the winged man's stargate. While these Tianding star people were enjoying the food and wine at the banquet, no one noticed the sword of the fierce sun next to Tidala's seat, with the prismatic crystals emitting a faint light on the sword grid. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 363. Binghua closed her eyes and rested her forehead on the folded index fingers. Her elbows were placed on the table to support the weight of her entire head. Her long black hair hung down on her chest. Binghua just sat in his office room and quietly waited for news from the investigating angel. Jingnan on the side looked at the queen's appearance and wanted to persuade her to take a rest. However, when he thought of the many angel sisters who died on the giant gate star, it felt like there was a stone stuck in his throat and he could not open his mouth. Just when the silent atmosphere was about to last forever, the arrival of an angel warrior broke the deadlock and freed Jingnan from the low pressure emanating from Binghua. Queen, a sky blade has detected the activation signal of the flaming sword in Galaxy No. 2. Binghua closed her eyes and instantly opened a pair of black eyes to look at the visitor, and asked in a very calm tone. Galaxy number 2. Sure enough, they didn't run far. Have you found out which direction they are heading in? Queen, based on the forward path, their target should be the star field northwest of Shima. Binghua nodded lightly, continue to pay attention to their whereabouts. Then Binghua asked the female angel who came to report to go down. Jingnan on the side asked aloud, does the queen want to immediately assemble the Skyblade fleet to intercept them? No, there is only one thing we have to do now, and that is to wait. Binghua shook her head slightly. Although she wanted to immediately lead her army to eliminate the Tianding people who raided the giant star in the second galaxy, she still needed to be patient for a while for the sake of future strategies. The lives of more than 30,000 angels cannot be repaid by a fleet of Tianding stars. A month later, the main fleet of the Tianding people led by Diddle finally returned to the gathering point of the beasts to destroy the angels, the Oya system in the south of the Sabata Alliance. The Oya Galaxy is the star domain where the Oya Orcs, one of the branches of the Sabata War Alliance, live. However, it was requisitioned by the god of thunder Liod's not long ago and established as his temporary divine domain. It was also the time to clear out the winged people. Combat Center. As soon as he arrived at Oya Star, Tidara immediately went to return his life to Liod's, the god of thunder. Lord Liod's, my subordinates fortunately fulfilled their orders and successfully sneaked into the base behind the winged men on the giant gate, destroying their only channel to communicate with other nebulae. Liadz, who was sitting on the huge throne, nodded. He was wearing blue armor and just sitting there quietly, which put great pressure on Tidala's heart. Tidara, you did a good job. Winged Man is not an easy opponent, we can't be careless. This time you destroyed the base behind the winged people and cut off their connection with other nebulae. The winged people in the Red Star Ring have become a lone army. Next, you will work with the people of the Sabata War Alliance to eliminate the Kamigawa ants that have invaded the star domain under the control of the Shima orcs. In his words, Liadz was very disdainful of the civilizations affiliated with angels, and he only used the term winged people when referring to angels. This shows that as the commander-in-chief of this war to suppress the winged people, Liadz, the god of thunder, does not despise the angelic civilization. After listening to Liad's instructions, Tidara bowed and said, I will obey the oracle of Lord Liadz. After a while, Liadz saw that Tidala looked hesitant and seemed to have something to say, so he spoke out. Do you have anything else to say? Tidala quickly lowered his head and asked cautiously. That's it, Lord Liadz. During the process of destroying the Winged Man base, we captured several Winged Man prisoners of war. On behalf of all the members of the Tianding fleet, I would like to offer them as sacrifices to you, Lord Liadz. Hearing this, Liadz became a little interested. He had only seen the appearance of the Winged Man in the video data. Now that there is a ready-made one, he naturally wants to see how powerful the Winged Man who can kill gods is. Then bring it. A few minutes later, 10 female angels wearing simple white dresses were escorted into the palace by the Tianding people. Before being escorted here, all the traces left by the battle on these 10 female angels were forcibly cleaned away by the Tianding people. At this moment, the 10 female angels behaved differently. Some were trembling slightly due to fear, some were observing the surrounding environment, and some had indifferent eyes like a walking zombie. The moment they were captured by the Tianding stars, these female angels were already mentally prepared for their next fate. As for why they did not choose to commit suicide, it was because they still had a hope in their hearts, which was their queen. The current holy left-wing Binghua will definitely come to save them. Liadz looked at the female wingmen standing in a row below, curiously stood up from the throne and walked towards them. The dull footsteps accompanied by the trembling of the ground reached the ears of the Tianding people and the female angels present, accompanied by a huge sense of oppression. Leo Good squatted down and observed the winged people who were about the size of his fingers. After a while, he stood up and returned to his throne. Tidala, I accept your sacrifice. Tidara's face showed a hint of joy and he said, It's a great honor, Lord Liadz. Later, my subordinates will send someone to send the specially made cage for the winged people to be installed. Liadz just nodded lightly, and Tidala stopped talking when he saw this. He said, Then I will leave first, and left the palace. Half an hour later, 5 huge golden bird cages appeared in the corner of the hall where Leo Good was. It is made of an extremely strong alloy from the Tianding star. The alloy railing is thicker than an arm and can withstand huge pressure. Anyway, it cannot be bent with bare hands by the strength of the second-generation angel. In this way, the 10 female angels captured by the Tianding people became rare animals locked in bird cages for the admiration of the Titan gods and beast warriors who came in and out. Because the giant star's stargate was destroyed, the logistics of the angels-affiliated civilization suddenly became a problem. Unlike angels who can survive and fight solely by relying on stellar radiation, most affiliated civilizations need food, drink, and energy supplies for weapons. Food can be solved on the spot, but the supply of weapons is a big problem. As a last resort, Angel can only guide the affiliated civilization to re-establish a heavy industrial base on the giant gate star to ensure the endurance of some affiliated civilizations' fleet weapons. At the same time, the momentum of the beast body civilization's counterattack has become more and more obvious recently. Every day, unknown beast body fleets attack the planets occupied by the affiliated civilizations. Fortunately, the affiliated civilizations have not immigrated above, so the losses are still within the tolerance. Another special event is that the angels began to summon a few advanced, top-level aerospace-level civilizations among the affiliated civilizations. Then these civilizations summoned by the angels mysteriously disappeared together with the heavenly sword king Binghua, and no one knows where they went.